Peach Pundit, the podcast, is a conversation filled with the personal opinions of the people who are participating. Any view or opinion expressed belongs only to the person who expressed it and not with anyone with whom that person is professionally affiliated. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for another very, very special edition of Peach Pundit, the podcast, where we are going to continue our coverage of the Frostopus. Buzz is brilliant for coming up and coining that term because the tentacles do go everywhere. And I have some news right out the gate. I didn't talk to our guest and Buzz here. Tonight we have a very special guest, BJay Pak, one of our former colleagues from the Georgia House of Representatives and former U.S. prosecutor, who is going to be here to walk us through the process and what we could expect as laymen to happen next, what's probably happening behind closed doors. Maybe you do a little speculation, but we're going to pick his brain on this. But the news today hit me real hard, gentlemen. I, too, am on the donation list for the Frost family.
Oh, my.
I found out today that a donation from 2017, from a long time ago.
Wow.
Of $50 hit my campaign account.
Wow.
So I'll be contacting the receiver to return that.
That's before they got into the really big money. That's me saying that, not anybody else.
Yeah. See, the thing was, back in the day, Michael Caldwell and I had this policy where we were going to be completely transparent, right? Mm-hmm. Michael and I we were accountability partners in a lot of different ways. And one of the things was we were going to be completely transparent. Every single dollar that hit our campaign account was going to be disclosed. We didn't use the anonymous function for the donations under $100, which is why we know that $50 campaign contribution from Edwin Frost, which I think was Cinco. I think it came from Cinco. It doesn't really matter. It belongs to the victims as far as I'm concerned. And since my campaign account is closed, that'll be coming out of my own pocket.
Now, I did go back and scan through. I didn't think I said I didn't take any money from them because, as I mentioned before, the only time they ever reached out to me, Brant the Fifth, Cinco, would call me and lay out in a long voicemail what his plans for my life were, and I never called him back because I'll make those decisions myself. Thank you very much, but but I thought I better check, because. No, I did not. I did not receive anything. So,
yeah,
don't want to be on this podcast and then have somebody come back and say, "Oh yeah, well you."
Before we get started, though, ladies and gentlemen, check in with your Gen X friends. We're having a real bad week over here. I mean, first the news of Theo Huxtable, Malcolm Jamal Warner,
an Atlanta resident of Atlanta.
Yeah, I don't know that the kids today understand the cultural importance of the Cosby Show. And I know Bill Cosby had his problems later in life, but the cultural significance of the Cosby Show is just
huge.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And Theo, growing up with him, he was just a few years older than us, or me, maybe just a couple years younger than Buzz, and dying unexpectedly while swimming. And then Ozzy Osbourne, who had just had his last concert just a few weeks ago. And then today the news broke that Hulk Hogan has passed away. So special thoughts and prayers for Ryan Purvis. We know he's a huge listener to the show and pro wrestling fan. But BJay,
we should mention, Ed Fulner, who was founder of or its longtime president of the Heritage Foundation, which was a hugely influential in Ronald Reagan's rise, and which of course was
limited government,
us
free
Gen
markets.
Yes, us Gen Xers, us old Gen Xers who got a chance to vote for Reagan. I got the chance to vote for him in 1984 when he ran for re-election. So I know you guys are so young, so old guys like me got a chance to vote for Reagan, and Ed Fulner was huge back in those days, helping to form and frame the political movement, the conservative political movement. And now he's just another neocon rhino trader, so like all the rest of us. So,
all right, so we're going to take a quick break, pay some bills. When we come back, we're going to let BJay walk us through what we can expect coming up next.
Peach Pundit has an anonymous Patreon who would like to invite you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. No one should fight Alzheimer's alone. With your help, no one will. Learn more on their website, alz.org.
Americans for Prosperity Georgia champions economic freedom and individual liberty across the state. They advocate for lower taxes, less government spending, and regulatory reform while mobilizing citizens to engage in the legislative process. Beyond economic issues, AFP Georgia is committed to more choice in K through 12 education for all students and removing government barriers in healthcare, like the Certificate of Need. If you would like to know more about Americans for Prosperity, head on over to their website, ga.americansforprosperity.org, where you can sign up for their events and learn how to get involved. Thank you to our friends at Americans for Prosperity for being a partner-level Patreon. If you, too, would like to be a Patreon to the podcast, our tier starts just $5. You can join us and our Pete Hegseth inspired signal chat at that amount, or at the $10 level, you can watch live. Like we have Sam Thomas in the chat back there right now, just pelting us with fruit.
Already getting snarky in there.
So. Yeah, he's getting pretty snarky already. But head on over to patreon.com/peachpoint and sign up for one of those tiers today. Like and subscribe. BJay Pak, how are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you guys. If you allow me a point of personal privilege, RIP to Hulk Hogan. It's a little known story that I was actually an extra on a show that Hulk Hogan was starring. I think he was filming a show called Thunder in Paradise or something.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. They actually came to, I went to Stetson University undergrad, and they came to film there, and I had a role in walking through the quad while they were filming with my book bag. So that launched my acting career.
Awesome.
Wasn't noticed, unfortunately. Then I
didn't know you went to Stetson, because I grew up near Stetson,
DeLand, Florida, right?
Yeah, I went to Deltona High School. I grew up in that area. DeLand was the county seat of Volusia County where I grew up.
Yep. And Chipper Jones's father was, I think, assistant baseball coach there, so used to see Chipper down there from time to time.
Yeah, he grew up in Pearson, Florida, just down the road from us, and he went to Bulls High School in Jacksonville, so he could get noticed for his baseball skills. But yeah, I didn't know you went to Stetson. That's crazy. I used to sneak into their library all the time as a nerdy, aspiring international relations type kid.
Whole library, come on.
Yeah, it was the best library in the county for sure. I mean, if the Deltona Public Library had burnt down, we would have lost both books. It would have been a great tragedy. But yeah,
matters.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have read some things about this, what Buzz has coined as the Frostopus, the Frost family Ponzi scheme, the alleged Ponzi scheme, I guess we should continue to say.
Yeah.
Although Quattro has issued some public statements taking accountability, which is almost close to being an admission of guilt. But he's also this week.
You got to explain your nicknames for Brant the Fourth and Brant the Fifth, right?
Oh, well, yeah. So for those who don't know, just for my sake, to keep them separate. Quattro is the older; he's the fourth. Cinco is the fifth, the son, and that's the way we're going to refer to them at Peach Pundit, Quattro and Cinco. But we found out a few weeks ago that there were the allegations made by the SEC. There was a civil case filed, and a receiver has been named. We talked at length about that last week, that the receiver is now pouring through records, trying to identify where they can claw back funds. So we're really excited to have you here because as a former U.S. prosecutor, I imagine you're very familiar with the process.
Yes. I've worked on several cases like this from the Department of Justice side. And also I'm a defense lawyer now. So from time to time I get these, although I don't generally represent folks who are accused of, Ponzi schemes and things like that. This sounds like from what's been reported and what's been publicly filed, a classic Ponzi scheme like situation. Just before I make any comments, I just wanted to clarify that I don't have any um, knowledge about the case other than what's been publicly reported. I don't have any insider information from the government or anything like that. So with that
Yeah,
proviso, I'd be happy to provide any kind of context or questions you might have about like how cases like this progress.
sure. And I think that's a great place to start. What typically happens behind the scenes once the SEC brings civil charges like this? And does it mean that there's likely to be a criminal charge?
So in cases like this, for those of you who may not be familiar, the Department of Justice, particularly U.S. Attorney's Office, works very closely with the SEC on cases that have certain facts or allegations that could potentially be a violation of not just the security laws, but also criminal laws. So in cases like this, it wouldn't surprise me. Matter of fact, we used to have regular meetings to talk about cases when I was U.S. Attorney with the SEC about what you have on your docket that potentially that you may refer to the Department of Justice. So the first thing that you would do, the SEC would let the FBI or the U.S. Attorney's Office know that there's some allegations here that you may want to take a look at. So the SEC has filed a lawsuit here. They alleged a violation of 10b-5, which is securities fraud, saying that Ponzi schemes generally fall under the SEC jurisdiction because particular instruments that they're selling, right, tends to be securities. And that's one thing that I want to point out. If you read the complaint, they're claiming the syndicated loans or loan agreements are securities. And so, but the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice don't have that restriction. We have, they have a plethora of different federal statutes that they could apply. So they would just tag along and they conduct what those of us in the industry would call a parallel investigation. Initially, the Department of Justice might not be overt; they might be covert, meaning they may just get reports from the SEC as they do their investigation through the civil methods. And what we generally do is send a letter to the SEC asking for access to their investigative files. And once that comes in, we could be fully active or take over, or we could go ahead and just follow along and see how the facts develop. A lot of times, people who are being sued may not know that they're being looked at by the Department of Justice, but a lot of times they do. Generally, they get a lawyer, and the lawyer, will tell you, "Wait a minute, I looked at the facts of this case. You may want to consider the fact that this case might be referred over to the Department of Justice." And one of the things that's interesting here is, the SEC, they'll usually take depositions of people that are involved, right? So I wouldn't be surprised in a case like this they try to depose Brent the Fourth, right? Frost the Fourth, I'm sorry. And then during that time, if there is any kind of potential criminal liability, the witness will plead the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Sometimes the Department of Justice, the prosecutor could sit in on the deposition. They'd be invited, and that's a clear-cut sign that we're looking at you, right? Yeah. So the DOJ would follow along with the SEC on what the investigation goes, and up until the time when they feel like they have sufficient information to take over and go forward with the criminal investigation.
So at this point, we haven't really seen any criminal charges against any of the Frost family members, including Quattro, who appears to be at the tip of the spear of this effort, at least from what we've been told publicly. Is that unusual, given that the fact that the SEC the SEC has filed this complaint and the size of this, $140 million, seems pretty big. So would it be unusual for there not to be criminal charges ultimately?
No, there isn't. The DOJ takes its time to investigate because in a criminal case, the burden of proof is a little bit higher, right? Usually to get a conviction, you need proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In the civil context that the SEC operates in, you just need preponderance of the evidence, meaning that, more likely than not, they violate the law. So the DOJ will take a longer time to investigate. And at the same time, if they're going to be covert about their investigation, they're just going to wait to see how the facts develop. And only thing that's stopping them from, rushing, or there's no need to rush because the statute of limitations is fairly long, right? So generally federal statutes, you have a 5-year statute of limitation from the last act of the scheme. So you have plenty of time to do that. I think the allegations here span a number of years.
Decade.
Including in recent years. So there's no rush to do that. And on top of that, if you think about kind of the priorities of the Trump administration, Trump 2 administration, because of the Department of Government Efficiency and kind of the federal workers reduction that action they've taken, I think they're resource strapped a little bit right now. So I think the cases probably take a little bit longer than usual.
Buzz?
Well, as y'all were talking, I was thinking, how would a case like this come to light? Because it sounds like, I mean, they weren't a bank, so they weren't really under the regulation, under the auspices of the Georgia Department of Banking. How would it have come from an investor, most likely, in this case, where they would have said, "Hey, I think I've been had here," and the SEC would then start to poke around?
Yeah, it comes from all types of places. A common one would be there'd be a civil lawsuit, right? Breach of contract, and they would allege some type of fraud or misrepresentation. And if the attorney who's representing the investor or whatnot felt like this could be a violation of federal securities law, they would just go ahead and let the SEC know.
Yeah.
There also could be a whistleblower. SEC has a whistleblower program, or it could be just a normal person, an investor calling the SEC and saying, "Hey, I invested in these contracts, and now they're telling me wrong things. They told me that I'm going to get paid X." And sometimes, you'll get a tip, anonymous tip, and the SEC could certainly look at that. And that's how these cases generally start.
So, kind of related to that, is the SEC's priority right now? It's obviously they're trying to recover as much money as possible. It appears that Quattro or Frost the Fourth is cooperating, which would lead them to more money that they can recover. Would that impact the Department of Justice's decision to prosecute? In other words, if they get a whole lot of money back and investors are more or less made whole, would DOJ then say, "Yeah, maybe we'll just leave this one alone"?
That factors into it, but it's really not about the amount of money that was paid back or recovered so much as what was the intended harm of the crime, right? Because the policy goal of a prosecution, one of which is to prevent other crimes from doing that. Now, if you were to say, "Hey, you can commit all the fraud you want, but as long as you pay it back, you get a free pass,"
then
you're not going to prevent people
bad
from...
message to send, right?
Exactly. So yeah, I think that the Department of Justice is probably looking at this, and I'll be surprised if there isn't, given the fact that this has been highly publicized, and the allegations seem to potentially fit into various violations of federal law. In particular, there's a securities law criminal component as well, or if you want to loop in other conduct, and I'll explain one of the things that they can probably do. You could use the very broad wire fraud, mail fraud statute, right? And in this case, the SEC's jurisdiction is limited by the fact that if, in fact, the underlying investment opportunities, the loan contracts, do not comprise a security, right, as is defined, and that's actually a very fact-intensive inquiry, then their lawsuit would be without jurisdiction. So that's one way that they would defend, saying that these contracts, and it looks like they were trying to do that. Some of the loan agreements, depending on how you structure it. But if you look at the Supreme Court's factors that they laid out on what constitutes security, some of the fact factors are present here. One you cannot do generally is to general solicitation to the public. Okay? Because securities laws are designed to protect the retail investor, particularly those who are not what you consider sophisticated investors. I think the technical term that people may be familiar with is accredited investors. So if you do a general announcement and solicitation to the public, either by advertising in the radio or mailers, then that's more likely to be considered a security, right? And then the allegations show that this might be syndicated, right? And there's no other kind of distinguishing factors that would make it fall out of the general presumption that contracts like these are
Right.
securities. So I think that's going to be the fight if they're going to fight the lawsuit.
Yeah.
There's a nugget in there I want to kind of pull out, and because one of the things that we know is that everything so far has been towards Quattro, the elder Frost. But we also know that Cinco, the son, was on radio shows pitching what he called the Patriot economy. He was pitching this very program. Would that implicate him in this instance? If that's too much speculation about this specific case, you can tell me that, or we can talk about it in more generic terms.
Well, that's actually possible if you think about it. The allegation was that a part of the misrepresentation, right, was kind of there were no losses, or these are very safe, or we're going to guarantee a return of certain amounts. Those are kind of red flags if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
There's no. First of all, the return rate seems pretty high. I mean, anything above 12% when the S&P on average returns 10, that's going to raise some eyebrows, like 18% return. Wow, how do I sign up? It better be crypto, otherwise it doesn't make any sense, right? So when you're out there pitching kind of an aspect of your any representation you're making, like we're doing this for Patriot, we're only investing in you know politically conservative kind of causes and things like that, and it turns out that's not the case, and certainly that could implicate whoever's making those statements.
Gotcha. So I want to shift gears a little bit about how the federal and state laws play. You, as a state lawmaker, have a little bit of background in that, as well as on the federal side. We had been told initially that Quattro was cooperating with the SEC. His public statements indicated that he was cooperating. The First Liberty website said that they were cooperating. And then there was a report this week that Quattro had pled the fifth in one of his interactions with investigators. If he was cooperating with the feds, and he doesn't anymore, I guess if he was cooperating, or if a defendant in a case like this was cooperating, would that give them any type of immunity from state level prosecution?
No, immunity. Only way that you could give immunity, there's only two types, right? One is what we call a letter immunity, that the prosecutor by contract agrees not to bring charge. And then the second one is statutory or some judicial immunity that's granted by a court order, right? And in this case, you don't have anything like that. I'd be surprised if the state government has given him immunity. Even that's the case, state and federal governments are separate sovereigns, right? We wouldn't stop them. Although there's some gray area on certain unique facts, but based on what's been reported, it doesn't seem to be anything that's going to be trigger respect to immunity. But we just don't know enough, and prosecutors generally don't give out immunities without knowing or getting something in return. If nothing else, they may promise something like a potential reduction or recommendation of reduction in ultimate sentence. But generally, that's about it. They don't. It's very rare to give immunity, complete immunity, transactional immunity to defendants.
Or potential co-conspirators as well?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the conspiracy laws, both state and federal, that's a separate crime than the actual substantive violation, right? Agreeing to do something that's illegal in of itself, the agreement itself could be a violation of federal law. So although you may not have been, actually taking the money or spending the money in an improper way, but you knew what was going on and you somehow aided that, right? You could be held liable for under aiding and abetting or conspiracy laws.
So how do federal and state prosecutors cooperate in cases like this, or is there a turf war?
Well, I mean, you try to coordinate and cooperate, and that was the goal, and that was certainly what I tried to do when I was U.S. attorney. I worked very, very closely with the state, with Secretary Raffensperger's office and Chris Carr's office, the Attorney General. But in cases like this, depending on the jurisdictional nature. So, for example, if you have investors from other states, it's a little bit easier to do it in the federal side. The federal side tends to be a little bit more well-resourced than the state level on cases that require lots of forensic accounting or subpoena power that's nationwide or things like that. So although they don't have to, a lot of times they defer to the feds on cases. And all the times, if you look at the facts of the case and the federal interest is just not that strong, then it makes sense for the state to take the lead to do that. And then the federal government would defer to the state.
So we know that the Secretary of State's office is doing some form of investigation. I made inquiries, and I mentioned this on last week's podcast, that I asked if they were doing something. They said it's an ongoing investigation. I said, check. Okay, is it a criminal or civil? And they said it's an ongoing investigation. We're not going to comment. Okay, that's fair. So with the Secretary of State's Security Division now involved, would it be normal to see a separate state prosecution?
Well, I guess it depends what the ultimate goal is, right? I mean, if there is a state's interest that's not vindicated through federal government's efforts, they may make sense to do that. One clarification, and my understanding is the state Secretary of State's office do not have criminal powers, and that's actually under the state constitution. I think defer to the district attorney's offices of the state with certain areas that are reserved for the attorney general. So I don't think the Secretary of State's office could bring a criminal charge, but certainly they could refer whatever facts they find out. They do have civil power, but I do believe that they have to act through either the attorney general or someone else to bring the lawsuit. So it's a little bit more complicated, I think, at the state level than the Fed.
BJay, kind of related to all this, there was a report that the state of Alabama was launching their own investigation. I think it was if I remember correctly, it was the state, not like the U.S. attorney or anything like that, because there were some candidates, or at least one candidate, who received quite a bit of money. How would that impact the federal case? Could you see, if the U.S. attorney in Alabama felt like he needed to bring a case, or if the SEC office in that place, how would that all kind of roll into this? And because there are, the AJC's reporting is there are donations, kind of large donations into a number of states here. How does that all impact this case and the investigation?
Well, I think the state of Alabama, felt like they have an interest in the case, and certainly they're welcome to bring that. It doesn't really impact the federal case, other than coordination, duplication of effort, and issues like that. But certainly, I think the federal government's scope of their investigation is going to pretty much encompass all the investors and all the activities.
Yeah.
Whereas the Alabama or even Georgia's will be limited by their jurisdiction, right? And anything kind of ancillary to that. So it makes it a little bit tougher. Like I said, when you have multi-jurisdictional cases, it takes more coordination and difficulties to get through the investigation to reveal the full scope of it versus the federal government doing it.
Well, so I guess if they were just recipients, if people in these other states were merely just recipients of donations, and the First Liberty was not, not conducting business in those states, then it's probably then local prosecutors and local investigators probably aren't going to look at anything, right?
Well, I guess what we don't know is what they've done. I mean, we do know what's been reported about one candidate receiving donations, but if they were advertising in the state, certainly the state has an interest in looking into that. So because it was a general, I think it was a general solicitation and also advertising. Yeah, that I think that a lot of agencies could probably take a look at it, and a lot of states can look at it as well. Yeah, and frankly, if there's a victim in a certain county, and that county prosecutor wanted to do it, they certainly could do that too.
Yeah, interesting. We're going to take a quick break. On the backside of the break, we're going to talk about how asset recovery usually works, and also talk about the state of the law, and if there needs to be some changes there. But right after this.
Golden Retriever Rescue of Atlanta, GRRA, is an all-volunteer, tax-deductible charitable organization. They are dedicated to providing veterinary care, comprehensive evaluation, and foster and adoptive homes to Golden and Labrador Retrievers who are abandoned, mistreated, neglected, or left in shelters throughout Georgia. We encourage you to visit their website grra.com and help connect people and dogs that need each other in their lives. You truly can make this world a better place by helping find homes of gold for these golden-hearted pups.
Conservatives Concerned is a network of political and social conservatives who question the alignment of capital punishment with conservative principles and values. Our programs include educating conservatives about the failed death penalty system and mobilizing them to bring about its end. We come to this issue for a variety of reasons. Some believe that small government and the death penalty don't go together, especially when we compare the high costs of capital punishment to life without possibility of release. Some don't trust the state to get it right. We already know that some innocent people have been sentenced to death, and for others, it may already be too late. Some believe that the death penalty contradicts our values about protecting life. Find out more at conservativesconcerned.org.
We're going to continue our conversation with former federal prosecutor and Georgia House Rep BJay Pak about the Frostipus. And as we do, I want to talk a little bit about what the victims can expect to get back, because one of the things we heard about the Madoff case, which is probably the most internationally famous Ponzi scheme of all time at this point, was that 94%-ish of the assets were recovered. And that was through seizing everything that he owned and liquidating it and trying to make the victims whole. And we've seen the receiver in this case already begin clawing back. There have been some very high profile instances. The Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger decided to return everything he'd ever gotten from the Frost family, over $8,000, just shy, I think, $9,000. The Georgia Republican Party this week issued a statement that they were giving back about $37,000, but only back to 2021. We know that there's a lot more than that, but that the receiver had mentioned to them that going back to 2021 would be sufficient for his purposes. What kind of legal standard governs those types of clawbacks, and how far back can they go?
Yeah, generally, when you have a receiver appointed, their duty is to bring back all the assets that it can to the receivership to distribute to the victims in the case, right? And to wind down the business and things like that. The main statute that they generally use is the fraudulent transfer statute. So fraudulent conveyance, which fraudulent transfer, and they could usually go back to about 4 years. So that makes sense that the receiver said that 2021 will be okay. They have the power to do that. Generally, donations and things that are not arm's length transactions are more subject to immediate callbacks. So gifts and things like that. And then, they could actually go a little bit further because the statute doesn't limit to 4 years. If they find out about something that was fraudulently conveyed prior to that, beyond the 4 years, Georgia fraudulent conveyance statute, I think it gives you 1 year from the date of discovery of that. So you get an additional year. So 10 years from now, a transaction that occurred 10 years ago, then you just found out about it this year, you may get 1 year to try to go ahead and call that back. So it's a broad and powerful statute to do that. And you mentioned the Madoff case and making victims whole. A lot of times these kind of cases, there's actually extraneous spending. So the victims generally never get 100% back from what they lost or invested. The exception will be if there's an appreciating asset you get back. So I have several cryptocurrency involved cases where I represent victims who got things stolen, and then we get the crypto back, right? And then the crypto is actually appreciated in value, so you are able to keep that. And at least in federal law, the federal government has kind of developed a policy that the profit should not be given to any profit should not be given to the defendant's benefit. In other words, like, hey, there's no loss in the case. Don't give any credit like that. But any kind of upside that occurred later on generally should fall to the victims, and that, to put them back into the place where they would have been before the fraud. And in Ponzi schemes like this, there's a presumption that it was fraudulent from the beginning. So, and then it's really, but records and memory and evidentiary challenges probably limited to a certain amount of period of time. If there's paper records to do that, to prove those kind of claims, I think the receiver might try to do that.
So I guess maybe shifting a little bit to maybe some of the red flags that people might have noticed here. That there's a political layer to this. That Frosts were very active in politics and for a lot of years. And does that complicate or change how prosecutors approach it? Are they more aggressive in pursuing these kinds of cases to send a message, or no difference in the prosecutor's mind?
I wouldn't presume that the notoriety or publicity surrounding a case kind of motivates folks, but I think in this case there's a couple of factors that I think might grab their attention. One being is, I think they have a particular investment style or like promotion in that regard.
Yeah,
I think there was some discussion about them being very Christian.
yeah,
Those type of factors generally raise the red flags of a lot of folks. And in particular, I think your earlier question about, what should the investors do, look out for. One of the things is, sometimes if it sounds too good to be true, it really is.
yeah,
High rate of returns, I think that they were promising. And then usually, things get really squirrely when you start seeing lack of transparency, right?
yeah,
I think there was some reporting about people wanting to cash out, want to
yeah,
get their investment back when the term was up, and they try to convince them not to do that. And those are generally the red flags that, wait a minute, why can't I do this redemption?
yeah,
And so those are the things that investors should look out for. And of course, I mean, if there's lack of transparency on the performance
yeah,
of kind of the investment vehicle, the contracts, or anything like that, there's always dangerous. And people trust others. I have seen cases where very sophisticated, very successful people fall prey to victimization like this, because business is based on trust, right? And people who generally commit fraud are very good. They're con people, right? They're very good at
yeah,
persuading folks. And so one thing that I would recommend is that if you are an investor and you're a victim in a fraud like this, I'm sure you're kicking yourself, saying, you're blaming yourself that you fell for this thing, but please don't do that, because this is a very, very common thing. And the other factor that I think you should probably look at in this case is the characteristics of the victims. Are they elderly, right? Are they vulnerable kind of class of folks? Those things really uh, push the prosecutors towards prosecuting a case,
yeah,
regardless of what the dollar amount loss is. This is certainly not Madoff, but there's significant amount of money here that's still missing. And so it's certainly a worthwhile case for the SEC to pursue, and potentially the DOJ.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the more just astonishing things about what we've read and what has been reported, and we've heard from some of the victims privately so far.
yeah,
Nobody's been willing to tell us the story yet, but we're working on that from the victim's perspective, because we want to tell those stories here at Peach Pundit. But they were going into churches, and we know of pastors who were giving their whole life savings to these folks, because they were presenting themselves as good Christians who were going to take care of other Christians. And would that fall into that category that you mentioned about the status of the victim being
Well, I
targeted
mean,
that
at
way?
this point, it's all allegations, and I get that. But in the federal system, actually, in the way that you do criminal sentencing, you have factors like if they're using a nonprofit or religious organization to commit the fraud, there is an enhancement for potential sentence going up. So these things are the policymakers have actually thought about, like, how do we accommodate or account for these type of aggravating factors, and that
yeah,
also translates into some of the factors that prosecutors look at in deciding whether or not to bring a criminal case. And so, yeah, all those factors will matter. If the allegation is proven true, I'm positive that it would impact the potential sentence if there was a criminal case that's brought.
So this question has been submitted by a current member of the Georgia legislature who wanted me to ask you this very specifically. Are there any laws that need to be tightened up to prevent something like this from happening in the first place? And was there oversight that should have been in place that failed?
Well, as a former legislator, you guys know I thought we already had too many laws. There's plenty of laws, right? I mean, it's I
Spoken like a good conservative legislator.
remember
Representative Pak.
when I was when I was a legislator, I blocked a lot of legislation because I just thought
We
hindsight
miss
always,
you down there, BJay.
well, hindsight always being 2020. I think the laws are sufficient. It's really about the law's not going to prevent people from committing crimes. They're just going to. There are specific rules regarding what you need to disclose and how you're supposed to treat investors, what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do. And then it comes back to good old, like, if it's too good to be true, it sounds too good to be true.
Yeah.
It's probably not true. And then, fall back to the old Ronald Reagan statement, like a conservative: trust but verify, right?
Yeah.
In any kind of investment, you should really try to do that. And be an active kind of investor in making sure that they are delivering on the promises that they delivered. If not, take action, legal, what otherwise, to stop it from continuing.
Setting this case aside, in your experience, having been involved in cases like this, you could use the fact pattern of this case as an example: $140 million Ponzi scheme. Do the people who have perpetrated that type of scheme ever see jail time? And if they do, what kind of jail time are they potentially looking at? Or if there's examples that you've already prosecuted, what are some examples of jail time type of sentences people have gotten?
So I was a federal prosecutor and not a state one, so I can't really comment on what I think that the state system will work. But in the federal system, the amount of jail time or prison time is generally governed by these rules called the U.S. Sentencing Guidelines rules. And one of the main drivers of what the recommended imprisonment sentence is the amount of loss or intended loss in the scheme. So in the federal system, it's not just about the actual loss of, it's about not just the loss, but the intended loss and relevant conduct. So even uncharged conduct that results in a loss, that's also being factored into the ultimate sentence. In $140 million, it's going to really up the score, the sentencing guideline score, and so the sentence will be pretty significant. And a dollar amount like that, I've seen anywhere from 5 years to 30 years in prison.
Wow.
I think Bernie Madoff was the dollar amount. I think he got like 120 years or something like that, right? I think that's impossible to serve. Obviously, it's a life sentence.
Right.
Practically speaking, it would be significant. It's hard to predict because the judges are not bound by the guidelines recommendations, so they could either go up or down, as long as the sentence is kind of reasonable within the discretion of the court. But if a case like this occurred and it ended up being prosecuted by the federal and there's a conviction in the case, I think the loss of $140 million would really result in a prison sentence well over, maybe a decade or 2 decades.
Wow.
It's very possible. Yes.
Wow.
That's serious. Buzz, you have anything else?
I guess maybe just a general question, BJ. What would kind of be the threshold for other people getting in trouble who weren't employees of First Liberty, but I guess they were. You mentioned advertising. They advertised pretty extensively in a lot of places, including Braves games, right in the middle of Braves games and stuff. Are any of those sort of entities? Could they be in trouble here, or?
It really depends on what they knew at the time, right?
Yeah.
Because in criminal cases, you need 2 things. One is the scienter, or mens rea, they call it in Latin. And the second is the act, right? The actual criminal act. So you could have done something without knowing the illegality or had intent to defraud people, then that's not, you're not going to prosecute those people.
Right.
Certainly, you want to prosecute people who organized or created an idea, person, or central to it. Then it's really up to the prosecutorial discretion as to who they think were involved and who should be held liable. You could go all the way down if you could prove that that person knew that this was a scam, and then they did something in furtherance of that scam, then you could certainly charge them. But it's a case by case basis, and a lot of
Right.
times this is where they tend to flip or turn lower level folks into cooperating witnesses against higher level folks. So that's also up to prosecutor discretion as well. Like, do we want to charge this person, or do we want to promise them that in exchange, if you cooperate, we'll consider not bringing charges against you?
Yeah.
That's not immunity. What that's saying is that, hey, you live up to your end of the bargain, we'll think about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that, you have to make a decision. Or, most of the times, what would happen is you would bring charges against them, and then they will plead guilty, and then they will cooperate in the hopes of getting a lower sentence.
Yeah. Gotcha.
In the chat, one of our Patreon says that the frost cost us another Acuna extension. ...
Yeah. Yeah. Throw
the ripple
book at them.
effects.
Yeah.
We're telling you, it's a frostopus. It has tentacles everywhere. BJay, this has been a great conversation. You're free to join us, or you can go. We've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for this expert level insiders. And I'll leave it to you with any final thoughts you have you'd like to share with our audience.
I do feel I feel bad for the victims in the case, and unfortunately, it's too common kind of scheme that we see all over. I think the best way to do this is to be vigilant about people you trust and people you invest money with. And then, the best kind of defense is to be too careful, right? That's the only way that you'll be able to protect yourself. And I do hope that the investors are able to recover the funds as much as they can, especially those who may have invested monies that they got out in retirement or what other sources otherwise.
Yeah.
But, the case is developing. We'll see what happens. And I want to thank you guys for having me on. It's good to catch up with everybody.
One last question before you go. Are we ever going to see BJay Pak's name on another ballot someplace?
Now's your time to make a major announcement, BJay.
Breaking news right here.
You never say never, right? You never say never.
I have said never. I've said never.
I do. I did invest in a popcorn maker, so we'll see.
Sit back and watch the fun. Yes.
Thanks, BJay. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, BJay.
So we're gonna continue the show. BJay is awesome. He's serious though when he said he killed a lot of bad stuff that came through because he's brilliant. Obviously, I mean, our audience heard that for themselves right now. But gosh, we do miss his intellect and his conservatism, his brand of conservatism, where we already have too many dang laws. What do we need to do with the law?
Yeah. Well, I think you heard, for folks at the Capitol know, one of the smartest dudes around, one of the smartest people I ever served with, and and had the pleasure of knowing. I've had the pleasure of knowing BJay for a long time, all the way back when he was a young prosecutor in William Duffy's office in the Northern District of Georgia. Just a prosecutor there. So it's been awesome to watch his career blossom and do great things. He put a lot of bad guys in jail during his time as the U.S. Attorney in the Northern District of Georgia. So,
I remember getting a call from him saying, "Hey, if you see any corruption, you call me." I didn't. I was never in those. Nobody trusted me with their dirty secrets because they knew I'd blow the whistle.
I didn't get invited to those dinners or meetings.
No. I was the wrong target audience. Like, BJay, they're not inviting me into their little schemes. I'm never going to be a good source for you.
Just trolling for business as a U.S. attorney. So
yeah, when he took his job seriously. He took every role he had seriously. I miss his intellect down at the Capitol. But we have a lot of other things we're going to treat these as quick hits because we're running out of time. But news broke today that John King has dropped out of the U.S. Senate race.
Yeah.
Buddy Carter and John King both have gotten calls from Brian Kemp saying, according to Greg Bluestein.
And Mike Collins too, right?
Did he get a call from Kemp?
I'm trying. Well, I need to pull up the article
because I hadn't finished the sentence yet, which is John King and Buddy Carter got the call, according to Greg Bluestein, from Brian Kemp saying, "You're not my guy. My guy is Dooley." Now, and we have heard through the grapevine from multiple sources that are close to the Kemp team that Kemp is openly telling people that Derek Dooley is the guy. And I think you had heard some things from some folks where there was a meeting with elected Republicans.
Well, I had heard that that Derek Dooley has had meetings with some of the more high-level Republicans in the House. If those happen, I imagine they'd probably happen on the Senate side too, or maybe they were about to happen. The State House, yes. And that those meetings, that folks were impressed. Folks were impressed by him in the early going. Now, obviously, we're away. I don't know how far away we are from him making a formal announcement that he's a candidate. And I don't know that any pledges were made to support his campaign or not, but he's making the rounds.
Yeah, he is. And King immediately dropped out today because I think he saw his path as being the Kemp endorsed guy, and he announced that he's going to seek re-election for insurance commissioner, which makes sense.
Now, I've got to apologize to Commissioner King. I was at an event last night, as I said on my Instagram account, and I mentioned earlier, with John King was speaking, and the labor commissioner, Kemp's appointed labor commissioner, Barbara Rivera Holmes. I'm super impressed by both of them. Just awesome people, rock solid people, and so I left and I went home, and as I have done at previous times, I laid in the bed and I thought to myself, you know what, John King's my guy. And then
that was the moment you killed everything.
Yes. So
the kiss of death.
Commissioner King, I am sorry that this. There's a long string of this. Going back to good old Tim Pawlenty.
The moment you endorse Tim Pawlenty,
Mr. Vanilla Ice Cream himself. I thought I like vanilla ice cream. There's a lot of toppings you could put. It's very flexible. There's a lot of toppings you could put on it. I'm going to support Tim Pawlenty for president. And literally the next day he dropped out. Herman Cain, the same thing. I thought, I'm going to support Herman Cain. And then he dropped out. So I'm sorry.
One of the aspects of this that I feel like a couple of different things are repeating in patterns here. Derek Dooley never run for office before. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to tell my audience, I have a bias against first-time candidates trying to run for the major leagues.
Yeah.
I believe there is a minor league system in baseball for a reason. You might have a number one draft pick that makes it to the major leagues within a year or two after they work their way through a team's minor league system, depending on their need.
Sometimes there's a Paul Skeens, right?
Yeah, sometimes. But Paul Skeens even spent time in the minors before he made his major league debut. And in the Reds, number one pick from last year is now pitching for the Reds, but he had to work his way through the minor leagues, and the Reds' number one starter had to go down in order for him to be elevated. So there are circumstances at play. And so using that baseball analogy, I really like my candidates to have some level of political experience before they go into an environment like Congress. I consider the Congress the major leagues. I consider statewide office AAA, and I consider state legislatures AA, right? And your local single A. So if you're a county commissioner, you're in single A. Sometimes you can jump from single A to AAA.
Catcher would be like rookie league. Is that?
I mean, maybe like James Hall's election board would be rookie league, developmental league or something. Yeah. But sorry, James, it's just the first thing that popped in my head. But I have a general. I'm going to allow him the opportunity to convince me. I don't have a candidate in this race. I would probably lean towards Mike Collins if Collins got in the race with this set of candidates, just because Mike, as much as he's joked around a bunch I don't mind the sense of humor. He has
Yes.
he has actual things that he can point to. Now, he violated my rule. He'd never run for public office before he ran for Congress. So I didn't support him back then. I didn't have a dog in that race. I live in the 11th Congressional, and Barry Loudermilk is my guy. I'm ride or die with Barry's. But that being said, he got the very first piece of legislation signed into law this year with the Lake and Riley Act. And so he has something he can point to and say, I have done this and I have been successful at it. And that matters to me.
Yeah.
So Mr. Dooley's going to have a long road to hoe, but you've been talking to some folks who might have other reasons why they're hesitant.
On the podcast last week, I mused that maybe, we were talking about what's the impact of the UGA link here, that he's obviously the son of the legendary Hall of Fame coach, Vince Dooley. And I wondered if we were musing out how powerful is that? And I pointed out he coached at Tennessee. And so I was at one
of the main rivals, Tennessee.
Yes. Chatting with some folks, and I saw a friend who is a huge Georgia fan, maybe one of the biggest Georgia fans I know. And I thought,
also a Kemp fan.
Yes. And so I asked this person, hey, what do you think? Son of the legendary coach, also coached at University of Tennessee. And this person was like, that is a major, almost a betrayal. Right. And this person wasn't joking. Right.
No. Yeah.
And then the person told me, well, somebody pointed out that, he kept Tennessee mediocre during his period there as the head coach. And well, that might soften the blow a little bit, that maybe it was part of the plan, the Dooley plan to harm this bitter rival. But so I don't know. I mean, I think the debate remains, and we'll see. I think, to your point, Scott, about, yes, he's a rookie candidate. There are things we don't know. We don't know what he stands for on a whole host of issues. If Governor Kemp is behind him, then that certainly suggests certain things, that Governor Kemp trusts him. But yes, that battle, that being battle tested, because you don't know until, and politics is a whole different thing than anything else on planet Earth. You're going to get a weird question out of nowhere with a microphone stuck in your face. How are you going to respond in that moment? Now, being college football coach kind of prepares you for hostility. I'll say that. You're going to, and Tennessee would be a place where you are going to get hostile questions all the time from fans and media and so forth. So
even from your own fans.
Yes.
Right? Your own media.
Especially from your own fans, right?
Yeah, right.
Because they expect, how come you haven't won a national championship yet?
Right.
So those are the kind of expectations that are present there. But that's different. So, can he handle that? We don't know. Where does he stand on all these issues? We don't know. Can he craft? Sure. Maybe he can inspire a group of young men to go out and do battle on the football field. Can he inspire voters? Can he articulate a plan?
Can he beat John Ossoff?
Right. How are we going to beat John Ossoff? That's the central question. Can he beat
John Ossoff?
Yeah. And we don't know. And, look, I have great respect for Governor Kemp. I don't think he would be doing this if he didn't think that Dooley's the guy for the job. But
there have been people who listen to this podcast who describe me as a Kemp loyalist. And that is fair, because I have said on this podcast that when Brian Kemp wants to run for something else, I'm going to support Brian Kemp. If that was U.S. Senate, I was there. If he wants to run for president in a couple of years, he can count on me to help in whatever way he wants me to help him. If he needs me to write a check, I don't have a lot of money, I'll write a check. If he wants me to knock on doors, he wants me to volunteer.
In fairness, for you and me, it might be, I need y'all to shut up and stay out of it. That's a possibility. And if that helps him, that's good.
That could be the way. Whatever it takes, right? I'm going to be willing to do whatever he needs me to do for him.
Right.
But I was with him with Kelly Loeffler. Like I told him at the time, I don't understand your pick, but it's your pick. So I'm going to support Kelly Loeffler. And I took crap from that from my own speaker because our speaker did not want Kelly Loeffler. Our speaker wanted Doug Collins. He told the caucus he wanted Doug Collins. And I went with the governor on this. And so I was willing to take the heat to stand with the governor over Loeffler. But Loeffler, again, didn't have the experience. And when she had to run for re-election, she turned out, for all of the great things that she's done for Georgia with Greater Georgia and the time that after she left, but she did not turn out to be a compelling candidate. And she had flaws that we didn't learn about until afterwards.
Yeah.
And it became problematic.
Yeah.
And it actually cost us the seat. And another example of Republicans losing in the runoff system in Georgia, where if we'd had instant runoffs, we would have won that seat. But okay, just saying, I'm not willing to give Governor Kemp the benefit of the doubt here. Derek Dooley's going to have to convince me that Derek Dooley can do the job and that he can beat Jon Ossoff. My number one concern is getting the strongest nominee that we can to beat Jon Ossoff.
Yeah.
I will be willing to, at this point, compromise on several of my policy positions, because whoever the nominee is going to be on the Republican side, they're going to be far more aligned with my values, even if I disagree with them some things, than Jon Ossoff. And so who has the best chance? So you will not be hearing from me who I'm supporting until after qualifying. So, because I've learned from Buzz, the moment I kick myself into one of these races, that candidate also usually.
Well, Scott, I think there's an interesting fallout. I don't know if it's directly related. You know, we've speculated on this show what might Brad Raffensperger do, and I've heard in the last 24 hours. I don't know that it's directly related to this. I think he's making his decision independently, but I'm hearing now from some folks who are pretty close to him, he's leaning toward running for governor instead of Senate. And so
that makes sense.
It does, because I don't think, not that Governor Kemp, I'm not trying to imply Governor Kemp has any beef with Brad Raffensperger, but Governor Kemp's trying to find a consensus candidate, which means a consensus candidate with Donald Trump. And Brad Raffensperger would not meet that criteria. So.
No. There has not been the mea culpa between Trump and Raffensperger that has happened between Kemp and Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Moving on, Kelvin King, who used to contribute here at Peach Pundit and is also married to one of the members of the state election board, Janelle King, announced this week he's running for Secretary of State, seeking the Republican nomination. Thoughts?
Yeah, it was an op-ed in James Online, the James magazine, and he laid out some interesting things. I linked to it in a post I made at Peach Pundit. I think it's free. I think they've made it publicly available. It's not behind a paywall, at least the other day when they released it. He outlined a number of things, including taking a few shots at the current Secretary of State's office by saying they were, more or less implying they've been rude and dismissive of people who come forward with legitimate complaints, and that we haven't seen these things being tracked down and dealt with in a proper manner. And Scott, he had an interesting thing too about, he doesn't sound like he wants to do away, if I'm reading correctly, doesn't want to do away with the Dominion machines, but wants hand counting too, which seems trying to strike a middle ground there, which might not please anybody. So
the hand marked paper ballot is the stronger argument. It just is. The hand marked paper ballot, you can make an argument on cost. You can make an argument that 75% of America votes with a hand marked paper ballot. That when we had hand marked paper ballots in the millions during the pandemic, the issues that were predicted, the fraud that was predicted didn't happen with those hand marked paper ballots. We're talking about absentee mail-ins at this point. Yeah. Those are hand marked paper ballots.
They're counted by machines, even during the pandemic.
Counted by machines.
Because machines are really good at counting large numbers of things.
The hand count is where the fraud would happen. It's not where the hand marked is.
and just where just mistakes would happen.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
think about DeKalb County. You got a couple 100,000 ballots sitting there, and you got to count them by hand and be accurate for a complicated ballot that for multiple offices, dozens and dozens of offices, and you got to count it and you got to get right, and you can't have any mistakes because if you make a mistake, it's going to be accused of fraud, of being fraudulent. So it's a non-starter.
I like Kelvin King a lot.
Yeah.
I have high opinion of him. I thought he would have made a better U.S. Senate nominee for the Republicans than Herschel Walker.
Yep.
He's going to have to show me why he thinks he's going to be the best person for the job, because he is now the second declared candidate, Tim Fleming. I saw Kelvin at the Blue Ribbon Study Committee on Election Processes the House has convened. He was sitting in the back, and I told him, I said, "Hey, it's good to see you. I've been hearing rumors about you." And he goes, "Yeah, more to come." And this is the more to come. So
there you go. Yeah.
And Sam makes this point in the chat. One of our Patreons says, "I'm begging the Secretary of State's office candidates to stop making that office only about elections. This is a key point."
Yep.
We fixed the election law. The other aspects of that office, like licensure, are a train wreck, and we should be messaging on the economy about those issues.
Absolutely.
If you want to learn more about that, head on over to our friends at ga.americansforprosperity.org, because that's a key issue that they are working on. Our last topic for tonight, before we head out, over the last several weeks, we've been talking about this giant loan that Burt Jones reported on his campaign disclosure, $10 million. And Chris Carr, who is also an attorney, understands the law, filed an ethics complaint pointing out that on his personal financial disclosure, the lieutenant governor has about $700,000 in liquid assets. So the question was, where did the money come from? And the loan doesn't actually, if you look at the campaign disclosure, or it doesn't say it's from him, or maybe he got a loan from somewhere else and gave it and he's now responsible for it. So David Amati at the State Ethics Committee already has dismissed the complaint. And Chris Carr is now contemplating suing over the creation of these leadership PACs. And leadership PACs are a concept that I fought against while I was in the legislature. And the moment I left and my friends left, who killed that piece of legislation every single year at midnight on Sine Die, it had become a rolling tradition the last 3 or 4 years I was in office.
Yeah.
At midnight to be looking at every conference committee report and identifying where the leadership PAC was being slipped in, because it never went through committee, and trying to kill that particular bill at the last minute. And the moment I was gone, it passed into law. And this allows for specific people like Lieutenant Governor, Speaker, Governor, to raise unlimited funds, to raise funds during session. So they're not subject to the campaign contribution limits that everybody else is.
Yeah.
And that means that they have resources that not everybody does. It puts them in a unique position. And there is potentially a 14th Amendment complaint that could be made saying that all candidates should be able to do this, or potentially do away with it.
So Scott, I was trying to remember, did Stacey Abrams sue over this?
I think she did,
and I was trying to, obviously they still exist, so the outcome was not.
But it's Stacey Abrams, so anything that Stacey Abrams
could have been a really bad legal argument,
right? I mean, this is the reason why we sued separately from the Democratic Party for the state election board. Sam says she sued because Kemp could raise money as the incumbent, but she had to wait until she was the nominee.
There's several articles here. AP article, July of 2024, Georgia Democrats sue to overturn law allowing unlimited campaign cash, saying GOP unfairly benefits. So I think what you're kind of hinting at is that maybe the fact that only certain people can have these PACs and other people can't. Why can't Joe Blow's state representative form a leadership PAC and raise money year round during session and unlimited amounts and everything?
Yeah, we'll do some more research on that question, because as I'm sitting here and I typed it into Google, everything came up about the largest campaign fine in Georgia history for Stacey Abrams. $300,000 David
Right.
Amati laid on her, and they had to pay it.
Yes.
So we'll go back and find that and update you next week.
Maybe.
But I just wanted to bring that up because it's getting testy.
Yeah.
In the
Right out of
governor's
the
race.
gate. Right out of the gate.
Yeah. The Jones campaign was like, he's much ado about nothing. And Carr is saying, hey, wait a second, why aren't we all being treated equally? This is one of the reasons why I think, as I was pointing out, our lawsuit was far more successful than the Democrats' lawsuit against the state election board, because they were just like, oh, this is unfair. They can't be doing this. But they didn't talk about why. Where were they getting the authority? Which is when we looked at their lawsuit, we've got to do something separate here.
Yeah.
We never even coordinated with them. Now they joined us as interveners.
Yeah.
But against my objection.
Victory, so
I objected to that, by the way. I was like, if I can stop them, I would.
Yeah.
But there were specific things in the case, and they narrowed their focus. And so it was like, we can't stop them. We have no way of stopping them. They're going to join the case as plaintiffs.
Yeah.
But it was our case that was ultimately successful because we were making the conservative argument. They don't have the authority to do this at all. The Democrats didn't want to go down that road because they love the administrative state, and we were trying to dismantle it.
I mean, this will be interesting because Burt Jones has been very successful. Even his race for lieutenant governor, he didn't go negative. He didn't have to go negative. He kind of started in the lead and stayed in the lead the whole time when he was running against Butch Miller for that post the first time around. So,
and he has a record to run on.
Sure,
and he has a pretty well-established set of conservative bona fides.
Yeah, and this will be interesting because it's different now. It's the attacks are going to come. Credible, hard-hitting attacks are going to come, and how will he respond to those? And how will his campaign? How will he conduct his campaign? So that'll be. We need BJay Pak's popcorn machine to make some more popcorn for us all to watch all this stuff. So
yeah, well, we'll distribute some popcorn at the beginning of next legislative session, brought to you courtesy of Peach Pundit. That's going to wrap it up for us. Did you have anything else you wanted to mention before we head out, Buzz?
Nope.
Excellent. We every week are brought to you by our Patreons who reach into their pocket very generously to sign up at patreon.com/peachpundit for at least the $5 level. Again, if you want to be part of our Pete Hegseth inspired signal chat, we would love to have you in there. It's so much fun. I have so much fun interacting with our Patreons in there. But we want to thank Sam Thomas, Jordan Reed, Shannon Ferguson, Jeff Cobble, Hank Burnham, Ryan Purvis, James Hall, Colin Martins, Tony West, and our friends at Americans for Prosperity, Robert Lee, and our friends at Lee 6 Media. Stuart Wilkinson, Ron Daniels, Mike Buchert are an anonymous contributor who wants you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association. Bo Brandon, Ryan Graham, John Vestal, Reed Powell, Brett Harrell, Justin Wright, and Bethany Ballard. Thank you each and every one of you for, and I left out somebody. Shoot. I know somebody's missing. I'm sorry to whoever's missing. Forgive me. I'll blame others.
Double mention next time.
You have been listening to Peach Pundit, the podcast. I am Scott Turner for Buzz Brockway. Very special thank you to BJay Pak for sticking around for so long, answering those expert level questions. We'll catch you next time.
Go Jackets.